Thank you, Your Majesty, King Ayub Tanyi, the convener and the President General of the African Indigenous Governance Council, Your Majesties, Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies. I see that Minister of Tunkuja has also joined us now. We welcome you, Minister, and thank you for your consistency that you've been here with us from day one, day two, and now the last day, which is day 3. This is what we expect of leaders at your level, and that they stay put when things of this nature are processed, so that at the end of what has been done here, you are amongst those that are in the front line in articulating the resolution of this conference. Thank you, Minister. Let's welcome the Minister with a round of applause. Now, we want to just apologize for the earlier application. It was really a technical issue. Otherwise, this team has done a formidable work, worked overnight until the early hours of this morning, around 4 a.m. And what we wanted to do with that document was we are going to read this document all over again. Just going to highlight the areas where we have done some editing and include some inputs which were deliberated on here on the first day. For instance, on the context, just to make sure that everybody is taken on board from a point of view of representativity, considering the geographical stretch of our continent, and ensure that all the 5 regions find expression in this document. And we have done exactly that. So we have done it from east to west, including sub-Saharan Africa, and ensured that all those issues that you pointed us to, we've done that. If you allow me not to read the whole document, just to start from this point that says, despite facing European forces with superior weapons and unfamiliar tactics, including divide and rule strategies, religious pretexts, corruption, assassinations, genocide, rape, castration, scalping, hangings, scorched earth policies, and later colonial education and assimilation, African royals, guided by spiritual leaders, resisted fiercely, while some succumbed under brutal pressure. The collective bravery of African royalty in defending their people and lands remains undeniable and must be honored. Resistance against colonialism spread across all regions of Africa. In West Africa, major states like Dahomey, Benin, Nigeria, and Ashanti put up a significant opposition to European incursions. These kingdoms and queendoms organized formidable armies and leveraged long-standing cultural networks to sustain lengthy conflicts against the British, French, Spanish, and Portuguese forces. At the same time, Central Africa saw the Congo and Ndongo kingdoms, with leadership from figures like Queen Zinga in the present-day Angola, who combined both military and diplomatic efforts to delay or disrupt European ambitions, thereby fiercely resisting Portuguese expansion and the slave trade. In Cameroon, Ruben Umnyobe led the Union depopulation to Cameroon, UPC, resistance against the French colonial invaders who murdered him in 1958. In East Africa, resistance was just as impressive. The Hehe under Chief Mkwawa, today's Tanzania, as well as the Buganda and Munyoro kingdoms in Uganda, demonstrated both organizational strength and resilience, with Ethiopia standing out in particular as its emperors set a precedent for the African sovereignty by successfully pushing back against Italian colonial attempts. In the mid-20th century, a Mau Mau uprising in Kenya, led by General Dedan Kimathi between 1952 and the late 1950s, mounted an armed campaign against British colonial rule. The movement and its supporters endured harsh repression under the colonial emergency. The Mau Mau struggle remains a powerful example of popular resistance to settler and imperial domination. In Burundi, Mwam Mwezi Kisago, during his reign in the 19th century to 1908, fought and defeated the invasion led by Mohammed bin Khalfan, a slave trader. In Southern Africa, the Xhosa fought the British and Dutch for more than 150 years, and the Zulu nation's heroic resistance is well remembered, though eventually undermined by the biological warfare and superior European weaponry. For example, the Zulu nation, led by King Shaka, defeated the British Army at the Battle of Isandlwane in 1879. When armed resistance was no longer sustainable, African royals, under the guidance of South Africa, pivoted to political strategy, calling for continental unity against imperialism. This led to the formation of the South African Native National Congress, which was later renamed the African National Congress. Although King Letsie of the Lesotho Kingdom offered to host its launch, British opposition forced the gathering to take place in Bloemfontein. Kings and chiefs from across Southern Africa, including King Lewanika of Zambia and representatives of the protectorates and the Kingdom of Eswatini and the Kingdom of Lesotho, as well as Botswana, were present. From this point, the ANC became a continental political platform for collective and African resistance. I must make a point at this point that the regent queen of Eswatini was actually part and parcel of the formation of the ANC. And she did not only do that, she actually funded that establishment. Equally important, the role played by the reigning queens, queen mothers, and spiritual leaders across Africa who preserved indigenous knowledge systems, nurtured communities, and kept alive spiritual and cultural practices during the most violent phases of colonial domination. Resistance to oppression extended well beyond the African continent. Within the diaspora, enslaved Africans consistently sought agency and self-governance. Haiti presents the most significant historical case between 1791 and 1804. Descendants of Africans led a revolutionary war, successfully overthrowing the French colonial authority and establishing the first free black republic. This event became a critical reference point for subsequent liberation movements. Nonetheless, Haiti endured persistent economic sanctions and diplomatic marginalization, such as enforced indemnity payments and exclusion from international alliances. Haiti also restored symbols of African dignity when Henry Christopher proclaimed himself King Henry I of Haiti, 1811 to 1820, illustrating a deliberate reclamation of African governance models by creating the first black monarch in the Americas. In Jamaica, Queen Nanny of the Maroons, who is widely believed to have ascended royal lineage, engineered a prolonged guerrilla resistance against British colonial rule, a leadership enabled the Maroons to secure autonomous status, thereby preserving and adapting African political traditions within the Caribbean continent. Similarly, in Suriname, Maroon societies such as the Salamanca and Duca maintained royal lineages and succession systems rooted in Akan and Central African heritage, thereby preserving African models of kingships and governance within the diaspora. Now, I will not tackle the preamble because the preamble emphasizes a point that then the points that have been foregrounded on the context. For purposes of not going through a repetition, they are there on the screen. Now I will move straight to the declaration. And the declaration reads as follows: we, African traditional leaders representing traditional leaders networks from all 5 regions of Africa and the sixth region, convened under the leadership of the African Indigenous Governing Council and including Kotla, Fata, Skal, Agda, among others, attending the African Traditional Leaders Forum from the 5th to the 9th of September here in the Kingdom of Eswatini. 1. Commend the AIGC, a Pan-African Assembly of African Royal Leadership representing recognized kingdoms and associations of royalty across Africa and its 6th region, the African diaspora, for providing leadership in the preparation of the African Traditional Leaders Forum in the Kingdom of Eswatini. Number 2, express our royal gratitude to His Majesty King Mswati III for graciously accepting to host us in his kingdom, and His Majesty's government for the wonderful hospitality extended to the leader. 3, thanks the African Union through the African Commission for Human and People's Rights for the wonderful facilitation of this forum under the leadership of the Commissioner in charge of the indigenous peoples and minorities in Africa. 4, congratulates the African Union heads of state and government for adopting the December AU theme of the year for 2025 and the AU organs for the advocacy and contribution. Number 6, acknowledges the African Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights for passing resolution ACHRPC/Res.543 of 2022 and ACHPR/Res.616 of 2024, among others, and the effort it is making in championing for Afro-descendants' right to ancestry and for the AU decade for Afro-descendants. Declare, we call upon the African Union Assembly to acknowledge the contribution of African traditional leaders to the theme of the year, who hereby declare: 1, that African royalty played a central role during the pre-colonial wars of resistance against slavery, imperialism, and colonialism. 2, that the African royalty continues to play a linkage role across all regions of Africa and in the wider diaspora, including the survival and adaptation of royal traditions through leaders such as Queen Nanny of Jamaica, King Henry I of Haiti, and the Suriname Maroon royal houses. 3, that despite continued relevance and the role of African royalty leadership in governance, unity, cultural preservation, and spiritual ancestral guidance in post-independence Africa and its diaspora in the 6th region, the misconception still exists on the role played by African royalty during the past oppression. 5, that African royalty have been concerned about these misconceptions sold by former slave masters and colonizers to cause divisions, misunderstandings, and mistrust between Africans and their kindred in the diaspora. 6, that we take this opportunity to clear the air about these misconceptions and to declare to our brothers and sisters that African royalty were not involved in either slavery or colonialism, and instead fought them back until superior forces quashed royal resistance at a very heavy human, cultural, traditional, and spiritual and economic cost. 7, that considering the damage that these misconceptions have caused, African traditional leaders wish to publicly apologize to its Afro-descendants who have been hurt, suffered, or humiliated in any way. Number 8, the post-colonial states cannot prosper without reconnecting to historical foundations and recognizing the place of African royalty, both male and female leadership, and the intertwined role of spiritual traditions in governance. 9, that as the unipolar global order gives way to a multipolar world of sovereign civilization, Africa needs to leverage its distinct identity anchored in its indigenous governance, royalty, and spirituality to take its rightful place in shaping global governance. 10, that the African Indigenous Governing Council provides a credible platform to unite kingships, kingdoms, and royalty associations across the continent. Call for action.
What's that?
We call on the African Union Assembly to consider establishing an AU organ representing African royalty leadership, both kings and queens, alongside recognized spiritual custodians in continental governance. We urge the African Union member states to ensure the full involvement of African royalty leadership in governance at the national level. We call for the official recognition and commemoration of the heroic role African royals, both men and women, together with spiritual leaders, played in resisting European imperialism and colonialism. We invite all recognized African royalty, kings, queens, queen mothers, and spiritual custodians, and associations of royalty across the continent to join the AIGC in advancing this movement for the recognition, unity, and renewed leadership in Africa's governance. Mr. President, convener of the conference, this is the formal submission to conference as the official declaration of this three-day conference. We so submit, together with these wonderful members of the drafting committee, to the plenary for the plenary to accept and adopt this declaration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General, for that presentation. The highlights which have been mentioned. This is about the second thing we have in this presentation in Shade. I'm sure all of you are familiar. We will do it and not overlook